Hey there, Tenno. I've never really made a Warframe video on this channel before, but here's something that I figured I'd want to branch out and try to do. I've got four Warframe builds here for some builds that I haven't really seen elsewhere. They're for Wisp, Gauss, Koumei, and Trinity. These all include some late game options that you get from arbitrations and helmet subsumes, but I tried to share some options that are a little bit more creative that I haven't really seen elsewhere, instead of just putting Nourish or Roar as a subsume or having melee influence on. Hopefully you enjoy. This here is the Trinity build that I have. I focus mostly on having her tank as much damage as possible to really get as much as I can out of Link. I've tried a whole bunch of different subsume options on her, but the one that I've ended up liking the most is the one for Elemental Ward, specifically the cold one, because that gives her a whole bunch of extra cold, it gives her some armor, it gives that redirect damage whenever enemies are attacking her, which doubles up with the Link, which I really like. What I have built with her, I have no corrupted mods, so everything's pretty standard across the board. Health and shields, or no shields, health and armor. Two augments, I have Champion's Blessing for that critical chance buff, and Abating Link to help with that armor. The two arcanes I like on her are Reaper, which give her even more health regen and armor, as well as Battery, that gives all that armor that I've been buffing her with to fill up that passive that gives everyone in her affinity range extra health. I have Combat Discipline from Arbitrations in as her aura to give that little bit of juice for that Champion's Blessing, and everything else is just kind of like duration, health, more energy, and then a Mars Hatred here for that teleport and heavy attack. You'll really want to see why, because I focus on heavy attacks on this build. The Akin Brunt, the Incarnate's not really fully necessary, but it's good for that heavy efficiency and also extra crit chance that I've built into that. What's interesting about the Akin Brunt is because it's a sword and shield, you can really focus on the kinds of blocking. He's got the best block angle for one of the weapons that you have. You could also kind of experiment. There's the electromagnetic shielding mod you can get from Kayla the Thame or from Dog Days, which redirects all the ally damage directed onto yourself. It depends if you're playing a lot more solo or with squads. Your mileage may vary on this, but I have her built for mostly heavy attacks. That's why I've got the combo damage, melee elementalist for even faster wind-up speed, the galvanized mods for the combo count, and this Riven Jump mod here. If you don't have that, you can probably just put, because it's toxin damage, you can probably just put Fever Strike on there. And because I'm going to be focusing on heavy attacks, I have melee animosity on here that really boosts up that crit chance. I also have the Javlock as the primary. It's kind of mid as a spear gun as all of them go, but it's special because you can have Amalgam Javlock magazine warp on it, which increases the combo count while you're blocking with shield. It's a good combo for the Akin Brunt because that's the only shield that we really have that has the Incarnate buff that we have. Secondary is not important, but I have Nucor just as a nice primer, and Vazarin to buff that affinity range that goes off of the Blessing and all that stuff. I also have a Vaska Kavat. If I'm going to be doing a lot of health tanking, I just like having really the Transfusion as a backup option, and also just having a secondary recovery option with Hunter Recovery. So the way this works, when I start spawning guys, I can just sit here and start blocking, getting a whole bunch of combo counter already. I haven't even started attacking the guys, and I'm already just filling up here. If I get Champion's Blessing, Arcane Intensity gets that strength here. And I'm just already reflecting a lot of damage to these guys without even, like, attacking them yet. And so, now I start going hard. The crit damage will just get increased the more I start healing because I'm going to have that Champion's Blessing. I'm going to just have a ton of crit damage when I start heavy attacking, which I can just go nuts with as much as I have the efficiency between the Incarnate and the Galvanized mods. And I really could just tank all the damage, heal it back up with Reaper and my Blessing, and just really go to town on these guys. Remember that it also reflects status effects done back at her, so if I'm killing these Scaldra guys, I'm just getting gas procs on these guys or whatever that I'm getting attacked with. It's really good for hit scan weapons. Here I have some squad footage of the build. I'm not even running it at like the max crit rate here. I'm only like halfway through it, and you can already see, well, I'm missing some of the melee shots, but like I'm already hitting like 11 million on these crits. These are really good for just any heavy attack that I can just throw out. My combo count is always just like sitting at least above like 7 times because I can just get it all back from blocking. It's a really comfy build to not only keep you strong, but also keep your whole squad from falling down at the same time by keeping them up. Because don't forget, they all get that aura from Elemental Aura too. I don't have any Archon shards on this build right now, but I'd probably put 1 yellow in, because I'm always going to be casting Blessing to get Champion's Blessing going. And she'd probably love 4 purple shards, because she's already got that massive energy pool. She could just definitely benefit from the extra melee damage shard option that the purple ones give her. This is the Wisp build that I like building for her. I have her built mostly around her passive that gives her invisibility while she's airborne, so I have a bunch of traits that buff her while she's airborne and buff her while she's invisible. The stat I like for her built around, I dump everything into strength, pretty much sacrifice everything with blind rage, transient fortitude, even some rumble mods in there for the overkill, stretch is in there for some of the breach surge range, adaptation for a little bit of extra survivability, and prime flow to compensate for the loss of efficiency from blind rage. Where I get creative with the build though is I slot in aerodynamic from arbitrations in the aura slot, and Boreal's Anguish from the Normer bounties, and the Exilus for some extra anti-gravity and some airborne survivability. You might like having Nira's Anguish instead if you have that, or if you don't have the Normer mods yet, you can go for Aero Vantage for extra anti-gravity, or Modus Signal. They both come from Jupiter Disruption missions if you don't have the Normer mods yet. The arcanes that I have on her, though, I have Crept Specular for invisibility buff, some more ability strength, and a critical damage multiplier, as well as Arcane Fury for some extra melee damage whenever I do critical hit. Because what I like to build around is with the Emotum Dagger Incarnate. It is the powerhouse of this build. You might notice that I also have Wrathful Advance on her 4. I don't like having Soulgate on this build because you're not really going to have the chance to cast it in the air that well, so it's a nice alternative to buff that melee damage. The Emotum here, I have all the Incarnate options that give her some extra range, as well as aerial melee range. You don't really need to focus on the other options because they're mostly for finisher damage. The Archon shards I have on her, I have 2 for ability duration, 1 for ability strength, which is honestly even overkill, 1 for ability damage with radiation, and 1 for cast speed, because I'm going to be casting Breach Surge in the air. The Emotum here is what shines in this build, because it has the ability to throw daggers while the Incarnate is active in the air. And what I have it built for is mostly just crit damage and blast damage. Galvanized Reflex is good to have in it, so you can have that initial combo, keep that Incarnate form up, you keep that Incarnate form and start slinging in the daggers, and you get extra crit damage with the Wrathful Advance buff. So then you're not breaking invisibility while you're airborne, so you just get a ton of melee damage in the air. Riven here is just to help mod it for cold. It's not that important in this build. The Arcane's not that important either. I have it on melee exposure for extra corrosive damage because I'm going to be casting a lot with Wrathful Advance and Breach Surge. This is combined with having a Moa Companion, specifically because they have buffs with the robotic mods. I can put on Anti-Grav Array as well as Tractor Beam, which are more modifications to have a higher jump and less gravity in the air, so I can stay in the air as long as possible and be invisible the whole time. And if I'm going to be in the air the whole time, I also just have aerial bond, because why not? Everything else is kind of flex. I like Whiplash Mine because it tethers everyone and groups them all together. It's a modding system. You pick your favorite mods. I do have Vergless Prime as its weapon just because I like having Shivering Contagion on it to just have a whole bunch of cold spread to everybody. You do have some backup options here for your weapons. I have for secondaries the Axtiletto Prime, which has the Zazvat Car mod you get from Father on Deimos, which is only for the Axtiletto Prime. It gives you ammo efficiency while airborne. You could also goof around by having Akimbo Slipshot on it, which also adds ammo efficiency while you're aim gliding. It's kind of funny. You probably could be better off with something like Cascadia Flare or Secondary Encumber, but you really could just do this forever here. Keep in mind, though, you aren't invisible while you're shooting. Shooting breaks the invisibility buff. If you really want to go overkill with staying in the air, I have a primary Tombfinger kit gun. I have the kit gun Arcane Pack Soar, which adds even more aim glide duration to it. And I also have in the Exilus slot Aerial Ace, where if I get a kill with the Tombfinger, I can just jump ahead in the air. So with Spectral Stellation, I get one big shot buffed while I'm invisible, and then when I get the kill and shoot again in the air, that resets my invisibility, and I just get to stay in the air longer. So let's see what this looks like in action. I have the Incarnate ready, I've pre-primed it ahead of time, I have my Wisp motes here, I start flying in the air, I jump super high, I'm just like staying in the air, double jump, and I just start flinging daggers all over the place. This is not even with the buff here. Let me do a grapple advance, and I'm starting to do red numbers here. You see these exclamation points. These are serious damage numbers with that critical multiplier here. I'm not even having to use my primary weapons, and I just have a crazy kill range because I'm just flinging daggers as far as I want. Here I have some footage of it running in a defense mission. You can see the damage is already buffed really good from Wrathful Advance and the Incarnate buffing aerial kills that I just one-shot the Scalder Screamer. It's really good for when an Acolyte shows up as well. This footage is crazy too because I have Valkyr in my squad that's giving me the War Cry buff, so I'm just having Haste Mode and War Cry buff, so I can just throw daggers extremely fast, even though they're just one-shotting people. I'm sure on a really high-level mission, you really have no problem with this build at all, because not only are you doing obscene damage numbers, you are also invisible this entire time. In fact, let me cut a little bit ahead into this footage where the Acolyte does show up. I can just show that I already have really good defense potential with Breach Surge, spreading the damage around. Blast is a good AoE proc, so it's really good mob clearing. And I just hit the Acolyte over the head with a Wrathful Advance, and they're gone. I'm going to just let this play out for a little bit so you can see how this is not only really fun to just keep playing the aerial game here. Sorry for the Void Swift fashion kind of blocking the whole view. I promised this whole video was only half an excuse to show off how good all my characters look. I love using this build specifically for long Void Cascade Omnia Fissures. Having the challenges with you're doing your gambling and getting extra buff for that is actually a pretty fun side distraction from just doing the mission repeatedly and just having something to break up that monotony. The way I feel like I've had a lot of fun working with this. I have all the mecha mods between the Aura, Pulse, and a Hound to take advantage of that. Archon mods are really good to spread Toxin and Corrosive. Stretch gives you that energy economy. She's built around shield gating instead of health gating. Catalyzing Shields gives you that shield gig duration. Fast Deflection and Arcane Aegis give you that shield regen. And one of the Augur mods, I have secrets for strength to keep that constantly topped up, throwing abilities out. How I've built her out specifically, though, is I have Zada's Whisper on her 4, and then Precision Intensify to really buff that up, because she doesn't really need ability strength for anything, any of her abilities, to just kind of keep that sustainable there. And Arcane Impetus will also just squeeze a little bit more of ability strength and efficiency out of that. I have it over her 4. I've experimented with it over her 1, which is, you could do that. Having the threads with Koumei Himo is actually really good for these missions, because you can actually just lock down the exilizers and like the choke points that guys go through. You miss the survivability you get with the lockdown with her 4, but having the extra little squeeze on that ability strength works really good. The way I have the weapons, you really can experiment with a lot, but she's really good with weapons that have a lot of very high fire rate. That's what spreads her statuses with her passive really well. I've liked the Phantasma Prime as a primary. It's modded for blast and electricity. I forget how the math of it specifically works, but having Zata's as well as blast damage really works well, especially with the Bane mod on it, because it kind of like does the blast damage, does the void damage additively, does the blast proc, and then that does a void damage thing, and then all of that gets multiplied by the Bane damage buff. Really just microwaves these guys. Riven here is just for a whole bunch of stuff. You probably could just put like Ravage or Point Blank on there without that. For secondaries, I have the Kuva Stubas. I like these a lot, because these are just like a personal comfort weapon for me. They've got a pretty good dispo, and they've got a pretty good stats on them. I have it modded for Corrosive Heat. You probably could do really well with the new Coda Dual Torxica weapons, because those spread cold, like, innately, and you could also just mod that for Viral Heat, but I need a Progenitor bonus that'll match that for my build that I don't have right now. And I also have Coda Mire, just for built around Slam, because you get a lot of statuses that you can spread around with afflictions, with throwing her strings around or whatever you're doing. If you've not subsumed over her 4, it's kind of tricky to have a Slam build with her, because the puppeting that the guys get caught in doesn't really get caught in the slams that reliably, which is really annoying. But I just have this mostly modded for crit and then like slam. It's good to spread your damage options for base elements across your weapons. That's why I mentioned Adore Torxica having the cold innate bonus, because I have electric on primary, heat on secondary, and toxin on melee. Having all 4 of those options, so you don't have to fully rely on your strings or your passive to get cold procs, probably would be nice, but it's not 100% necessary. You could just gamble for it. And to top it off, I have a Pharaoh Parasite for being able to have a Hound mods for the mecha set, as well as just anabolic pullage and increasing toxin damage a little bit more. Just another little squeeze there. Claws are not that important. It's mostly just to have cold a week and more elements that spread around. I like gas on it so far, because that's another element that you could have on there. The Archon shards I have on her are definitely a hodgepodge. I only really have a yellow for casting speed, but I have one for the extra corrosive procs that works really well. I have one for the purple equilibrium effect, which works pretty well for survivability. I have an orange for the secondary critical chance, and then I also have one randomly just for the toxin status effects. It really could pick whatever you want for these. I just would recommend probably the yellow for casting speed, because everyone could want that, and the purple for the health pickups. And also probably the one green for the corrosive stacks, because you get a lot of corrosive with Archon continuity, and if you get lucky with Wormling's Aid as one of your passive stats. Here you can see I've got a supercut that I'm going to put together of me running a really long Void Cascade. I've already got a whole bunch of buffs, like the one that shoots out fireballs whenever I'm shooting rapidly, which is really good for high fire rate weapons. I've got the Matter Eye School on. You pretty much need it for Void Cascade and Steel Path to get those Thrax guys down with Void Strike. Once I start getting the slams going, statuses are going nuts, especially when I'm getting unlucky with the string roll that spreads all of them. There's just a whole bunch of numbers out in the corner because of the mecha set is just doing its thing along with Contagion Bond. Unfortunately, it doesn't really help with clearing your challenges as well, but you really want to be able to clear as much as you can when it's a really high level Void Cascade. And then Phantasma, you can see these guys are just getting microwaved down. Cutting ahead here, this is what I mean by just her having really good just lockdown potential for chokeways. I've got her primary is primed with her passive, and you can see just with Phantasma Prime as a beam weapon, just turning all these guys, knocking them over like dominoes, like without any resistance at all. It's the reason I also like having Galvanized Acceleration on there, because having the beam weapon length for clearing guys 20 meters away is good for clearing your challenges. Cutting ahead again here, you can see the guys are starting to hit level 4,000, but still going pretty strong. You gotta play a little bit more cautiously, keep your KPM up to keep those shields running, but these guys are still going down. The Thraxes are still really easy to get to their ghost form because the Void buff is... because Status Whisper is stealing all that overguard off of them. It's really still going pretty strong. I feel like the only trip up I get a lot of the time, one of the weaknesses with this build, unfortunately, is you don't really have a good lockdown option for Acolytes, but it's not that you can't deal with them, it's just sitting there with beam weapons, you're just kind of tickling them until they go down, or unless you have your slam combo built all the way up. I just know my end-of-year usage stats are going to be stacked with Koumei as my most used frame, just because I'm not playing her the most per se, but I'm definitely putting in the most hours, and I'm taking her to hour-long missions and just trying to see how long I can go with her, and she's just gonna be creeping up on to one of my most played frames just because of that. Speaking about frames that have really good potential for weapons platforms, I have Gauss here with a subsumed for energized munitions, turning some weapons that have the weakness of running out of bullets too soon or have some really long reloads, just turning them into bullet hoses here. I've got some pretty crazy stats on the build here. Basically, nothing's really... The stats I have on this build are mostly for range. I've got a good amount for Thermal Sunder to have Arcane Hotshot proc. Thermal Transfer is there for Thermal Sunder, so everything else kind of gets Innate Blast. Vitality there, also there for that Sunder for the extra heat damage. And everything else is just kind of efficiency, flex. Nothing really too much in the negative here. I have Arcane Aegis because I have Energized Munitions subsumed over his 2 Ballistic Battery, and this really gives him the survivability that he misses from having that ability dropped out here. My favorite weapon that I like to run with this is the Baza Prime, a nice submachine gun with not really too much bells and whistles. It has a really nice fire rate and kind of just... it's able to dump everything here. You turn this thing into a laser-guided minigun missile, just turning energized munitions on. It's mostly built for fire rate, some crit, some toxin to go with the extra crit damage here. Arcane for primary crux, give it that extra status chance, and ammo efficiency to additive onto that. It really makes it a lot of fun to use. The ribbon I have for this here is just more fire rate and some multi-shot. You probably could just pick your favorite status instead if you want that there. I've got Toxin, you can probably just put a dual stat mod there. You've got a lot of options if you want secondary weapons that use a lot of high fire rate. You really could just pick your favorite for here. I like going for the Piranha Prime, which has its passive for doubling its fire rate whenever you get a couple kills snowballing with it, and it just keeps ramping on up really fast, and it's a really fun weapon to use. Kratos is here just because I like the Sprint Seed buff as the stat stick for it, and you also just have the nice swag that goes with it. You honestly could run Harmony, because if you're building into fire rate, you could probably build up a lot of Toxin or Heat procs really fast, and then just finish them off with one big reaping heavy attack. Archon shards I have on this, mostly for ability strength to flex how strong Redline can go by buffing its fire rate and attack speed a lot faster. And everything else is just kind of flex for yellow shards. I've got one for the preparation energy at spawn, one for the parkour velocity to have Gauss's movement speed even more snappy, and I have a casting speed shard to make Thermal Sunder go as fast as I want. Companion's not that important, I just have a Panzer Volpifila to proc viral on everything. It's pretty standard for as far as these things go, except for Tenacious Bomb to get that critical multiplier on headshots here. But let's take a look at how this is in action. If I start spawning a whole bunch of guys here, ramping up Redline, getting the speed up, and then just Thermal Sunder. Everyone's got that crit chance. Turn on energized munitions. This is turning into a bullet hose. I don't barely have to reload. I just can hold this button down, and you can hear this buzzing like an AC-130. Let's see how this looks with the Piranha here. This is also just... I need to turn it on yet. This with the blast damage you get from Thermal Sunder, you almost might need to mod for recoil, because you have so much recoil just throwing all these shots out and then not having any let up with your reload speed here. It's good, clean, simple fun. Let's take a look at this in an exterminate mission here. It honestly probably is not as effective as the standard Gauss build of just running Thermal Sunder and hitting Thermal Sunder 10 times over, but just look how crazy this is. If someone looks at me funny, I just turn the hose on them, and then they just get a face full of blast procs. It is so funny to just hear you let them loose. It's really fun, it's really crazy, and it's a lot of fun. It's what we're playing this game for if it's not to have fun with it. So wait, that's the whole video. That's everything I got for today. Let me know if you people like that, because I don't really make videos like this too often, specifically for Warframe. This is really a lot more advanced stuff, so if people want to see something that's more beginner-friendly, I would be happy to be obliged. Or if you want to see more stuff that's kind of like weird, idiosyncratic kind of ways the systems of this fit together, that's also nice too. Or who knows, maybe I'll never do anything like this ever again. Don't feel very worried about me, because I deserve all of this. I don't gotta do a whole big YouTuber spiel, but I'd like to see comments if people like to learn something, if you were like being able to mess with these builds a little bit and do something fun that I haven't figured out with these. That's part of the fun of this. If you want to support maybe me making another video like this, I put a Ko-fi link in the description here. No big pressure, I've got a day job, but also my headphones broke while I was editing this video, so that would be a good help if you ever want something else like this. Thanks for watching, Tenno.